I always knew Meredith didn't like me much, but I never thought she'd go this far. Thanksgiving had always been my favorite holiday. Not because of the food. I'm too old for seconds, and everything gives me heartburn anyway. But because it was the one time of year I could see the people I had helped raise all gathered in the same place. I never asked for much. Just a chair at the table, just to be invited. But this year, I wasn't. The phone call came 2 days before Thanksgiving. It wasn't my son Peter who called. It was Meredith. She said, as plainly as someone might cancel a dentist appointment, "We decided to keep this year small. Just the kids and some of Peter's colleagues. You understand, right? Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing." I sat there holding the phone to my ear in silence, my chest tight. She continued, her voice overly polite. "It's just been so busy. We need some quiet time as a family. Maybe we can plan something next weekend." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I knew what she was doing. This wasn't about space. This was about erasing me. She didn't even try to pretend I was still part of the family. No suggestion to stop by for dessert. No offer to bring me a plate. Just a casual dismissal like I was someone she barely remembered. And Peter? I never even heard his voice on the other line. After the call, I just sat there on the edge of my bed staring at the framed picture of Peter and me on his graduation day. He was wearing that silly hat, and I had my arm around him. He looked so happy. We both did. That picture used to mean something. Now I couldn't even look at it without feeling sick. Thanksgiving morning came, and it was quiet, too quiet. I boiled a small potato and heated a frozen slice of turkey I had in the back of the freezer. I didn't even make cranberry sauce. What was the point? I opened my tablet to pass the time and saw Meredith had already started posting pictures. The long oak table set for 12. Candles. A roast turkey, 2 kinds of pie, string lights hanging above the fireplace. There was Peter, carving the turkey like he was hosting a holiday special. Meredith was taking selfies with the kids, everyone smiling, everyone happy, and not a single empty seat at the table. That was what hit the hardest. Not the food, not the decorations, but the fact that there was no space left for me, like I was never meant to be there at all. I stared at the pictures for a long time before shutting the tablet. I didn't cry. I just sat at the table with my boiled potato and my cold turkey, chewing in silence while the sound of laughter echoed in my memory. Around 6 p.m., the doorbell rang. It was my neighbor Gloria, holding a paper plate wrapped in foil. She said, "I thought you might like some stuffing. I made too much." I must have looked stunned because she added quickly, "Don't worry, I'm not trying to pity you. I figured you were alone today." I took the plate, my hands shaking more than I'd like to admit. I thanked her and shut the door. Later that night, as I washed the single dish I used, I kept thinking about how I ended up here. How I went from being the one who used to host Thanksgiving dinners for 20 people to being told I wasn't welcome anymore. I gave so much to Peter and Meredith. I helped them with the down payment on that house. I watched the kids when Meredith went back to school. I lent them money when Peter's business was just getting started, even dipped into my retirement. I never asked for anything in return, just to be part of their lives. But it was clear now, I wasn't needed anymore, or wanted. And yet, something shifted in me that night. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe it was the way Meredith looked so smug in those photos. Or maybe it was just finally understanding that no one was going to respect me unless I did something about it. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat down at the kitchen table with my old notebook. I hadn't opened it in years. The leather cover was cracked. Inside were records I used to keep of bills, family notes, even letters never sent. Tucked between the pages was a folder. It had the deed to the lakeside cottage my sister left me 10 years ago. A place Peter never asked about, probably forgot existed. I had kept it off the books, quiet, separate. I ran my fingers over the paper. The name on the deed was mine, only mine. I sat there for a while, staring at the name, my name, printed in neat letters, and thought, maybe it was time I stopped, waiting for someone to give me a seat at their table. Maybe it was time I built my own. I closed the notebook and slid it back into the drawer. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without feeling like I was begging to be included. They had flaunted their perfect dinner. They had paraded their happy family like I didn't exist. But they had no idea what I still had, and what I was getting ready to do with it, and they wouldn't notice I was gone, until they realized something they relied on had disappeared with me. The morning after Thanksgiving, I didn't open the blinds. I made a single cup of coffee, sat at the table, and ate dry toast while the house sat still around me. There were no calls, no messages, no leftovers dropped off at my door. Just the steady hum of the fridge and the ticking of the wall clock. Meredith had posted even more pictures overnight. "Grateful for this beautiful family," she wrote in one of the captions. There were at least a dozen shots. Peter helping the kids with crafts, the table lit with warm candlelight, Meredith hugging Peter's mother, who they invited, apparently. Not me, though. I closed the app and deleted it from my tablet. I didn't want to see their faces anymore. I opened the drawer again. The notebook was still there, just where I'd left it. I took it out, sat back down, and opened to the page, with the deed. My sister June left me that cottage 15 years ago when she passed. It was in northern Michigan, on a small lake called Lake Colby. It wasn't anything special to look at. Just a one-story home with wood siding and an old dock, but it was mine, completely mine. I hadn't visited it in nearly 4 years. Peter never knew about it. Not because I was keeping secrets, but because he never asked. The day I signed the property into my name, I remember thinking I'd eventually gift it to him or one of the grandkids. But that idea faded over time. I placed the deed on the table and stared at it for a long time. My name in full. Margaret. Evelyn Hutchins. No married name, just mine. Later that day, I called the lawyer who handled June's estate. I wasn't even sure he was still practicing, but he was. His name was Thomas Brandt, and his office was still in the same building off Lincoln Avenue. "Margaret?" he said, surprised. "It's been a while. What can I help you with?" "I'd like to talk about transferring the Colby property into a new trust," I told him. "Under my full control." There was a pause. "Sure," he said slowly. "Do you want to come in and discuss options?" "I'd like that," I said. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow works." I hung up and stared at the phone. I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing yet, but I knew it felt right. That evening, Peter called. Not to apologize, just to check in. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice casual. "Just wanted to see how your Thanksgiving went." I didn't say anything right away. After a second, he added, "I hope you weren't too lonely. Meredith said she talked to you." "She did," I said. "We really needed a small one this year. The kids were tired. Work's been stressful." Could almost hear the words he was not saying. It wasn't personal. Don't make it a big deal. "I understand," I said plainly. I made myself something and stayed home. There was an awkward pause on the line. "Well, that's good." I'm glad you were okay." Then he launched into a story about the turkey nearly burning, how Meredith's cranberry sauce came out too tart, and how the kids made handprint turkeys. Not once did he ask if I had eaten enough or if I wanted to stop by over the weekend. It was like we were acquaintances catching up, like I was a neighbor, not his mother. When we finally said goodbye, I stared at the phone for a while, then turned it off completely. The next morning, I went to see Thomas Brandt. His office looked exactly the same, dark green carpeting, wood-paneled walls, and a large old map of Michigan on the wall behind his desk. He poured us both cups of coffee from a small thermos and got right to the point. "What are we doing, Margaret?" "I want to put the cottage into a living trust, and I want to make sure no one in my family can touch it. No contesting, no backdoor tricks. I want it to go to someone who actually needs it, not Peter, not his kids." He raised his eyebrows slightly but didn't interrupt. "I'm not trying to punish anyone," I added, "but I see things clearly now. I'm not part of their future, and they've made it clear I'm not part of their present. So, I'm going to stop planning my life around them. Thomas nodded. We can do that. I'll draft the documents. Do you have someone in mind for the beneficiary? Not yet, I said, but I will. We spent the next 45 minutes going over options, legal language, and signing some early authorizations. I left the office feeling tired but oddly focused. On the drive home, I passed by a community center near the park. A small sign out front read, Holiday Meal Drive, Volunteers Needed. I hadn't volunteered in years. I used to do it when Peter was little, back when we were barely scraping by, and I wanted him to understand that helping others didn't require money, just time and effort. But somewhere along the way, I'd stopped. That night, I called the number on the sign. The coordinator, a woman named Lynn, picked up. Are you still looking for help with the meal drive? I asked. Always, she laughed. You available this weekend? I am. Perfect. We're sorting and packing donations on Saturday morning. I added the time and address to my calendar. It wasn't anything big, but it felt like a step. That weekend, I showed up to the center in a heavy coat and gloves. The wind was biting, but I didn't care. Inside, the place was buzzing with people, teenagers bagging vegetables, older men breaking down boxes, and women organizing canned goods into bins. Lynn welcomed me with a smile. Margaret, right? Thanks for coming. She handed me a clipboard and put me to work sorting bags by family size. I spent the morning checking off boxes, labeling packages, and laughing with strangers. No one asked me what my son did. No one cared what kind of Thanksgiving I'd had. They just needed help, and I gave it. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible. After the shift, I stayed behind to help a woman carry 2 large bags of food to her car. Her name was Missy. She was about my age, maybe a little younger, and raising 2 grandkids on her own. You don't know how much this helps, she said, sliding the bags into her trunk. We've been eating cereal for dinner some nights. I'm glad I could help, I said. She smiled. Wish more people cared like you. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and watched her drive off. When I got home, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote her name down in my notebook. Missy, 2 grandkids, single guardian. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I wanted to do something. That Sunday morning, I woke up before the sun. I hadn't done that in years, not without needing to anyway. My joints ached more than usual, probably from all the lifting the day before at the community center. But the ache felt different, productive in a way. Like something inside me had finally been moved after staying still for too long. I got dressed, slowly, pulled on my thicker cardigan, and sat by the kitchen window with a mug of coffee. The street outside was quiet. The cold had kept most folks indoors. But I didn't mind the stillness. It gave me space to think. I opened my notebook again. Missy's name was there. Underneath it, I had scribbled one line. Deserves better. I stared at that for a long time. Then I flipped back to the front of the notebook and found the folder with the Colby Lake deed again. I spread the documents out across the kitchen table, made notes in the margins, and circled the sections that outlined my ownership rights. One line in particular stood out. Title held exclusively under Margaret E. Hutchins, with full discretion on future assignment or sale. It was mine. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel guilty about it. Around noon, I called Thomas Brandt's office and left a message. I told him I'd be bringing a name for the trust beneficiary by the end of the week. Then I called the Colby property manager, a man named Ron who'd been maintaining the place for years with minimal involvement from me. I asked if he could take a look around and give me an updated list of what needed repair. You thinking of selling, Margaret? He asked. No, I said plainly, but I'm thinking of using it. I could tell by the silence that he wasn't used to me making decisions like that. For years, I had just paid the bills, left the place idle, and didn't ask many questions. But I was asking now. After we hung up, I drove to the grocery store. I passed by Peter and Meredith's neighborhood on the way. I knew better than to stop, but I glanced toward their house anyway. From the road, I could see Meredith's car in the driveway and Peter's big black SUV out front. Their house looked like something from a postcard. Wreaths on the windows, 2 little reindeer sculptures lit up on the lawn. It looked perfect. It always did. And yet, I didn't feel tempted anymore. Back home, I made a sandwich, sat at the table, and scrolled through the contact list on my phone. It had been years since I'd deleted anyone, but I noticed something. Peter's name was listed with 3 separate numbers: work, cell, and home, and I hadn't dialed any of them in weeks. He hadn't called again after Thanksgiving. Not once. That evening, I got a text from Lynn at the community center. "Hey, Margaret, we're doing another drive Friday. Think you could help with pickup deliveries? We're short on cars." I typed back right away. "Yes. Just tell me when and where." And then, I did something small but strangely significant. I removed Peter from my phone's favorites list. Just a swipe and a tap, but it felt like cutting a thread that had been fraying for years. On Monday, I went back to Brant's office with the name. "I want the Colby property set to transfer to Missy," I said, "the woman from the food drive. I don't want her to know yet, and I don't want her to be pressured to accept it. But I want it locked in, and I want it secure." Thomas didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me, then down at the papers. "I can draft the language so that she doesn't take ownership until you're ready. That way she doesn't feel overwhelmed." "But she's not family?" "No," I said. "She's not. That's the point." He nodded and began typing. It took about 25 minutes to get the draft ready, and I signed where he told me to. No fanfare, no speeches, just ink on paper and a quiet sense that something had shifted for good. When I left the office, I walked 2 blocks over to the pharmacy to refill my prescription. While I waited, I wandered down an aisle and saw one of those oversized holiday displays with tinsel and fake snow. There were little nutcrackers lined up next to peppermint bark. One of the clerks, a girl no older than 20, looked up and smiled politely. "Looking for anything?" "No," I said, shaking my head. "Just passing through. I wasn't looking for anything. Not anymore. Not from them." Friday came quickly. I showed up at the community center just after 8 a.m. and was assigned a delivery route. 6 stops, all within the county. My car was packed with paper bags full of groceries, fresh produce, and a few small toys. The second stop was Missy's. She didn't recognize me at first when I knocked on her door with 2 bags in hand. Then her eyes lit up. "Oh, it's you. From last week." "That's me," I said, handing her the bags. "I got assigned your route." She smiled, looked tired. Her hair was tied back and she wore an old sweatshirt with the collar stretched out. "Kids are homesick," she said. "Stomach bug. But this helps. A lot." I nodded. I figured. She hesitated before saying, "I don't want to sound ungrateful, but why do you do this? You don't have to. You seem like you've got your own life." I thought about that for a moment. "Because I spent too many years giving to people who didn't see me," I said. "Now I want to give where it matters." She didn't say anything for a second, just looked at me like she understood something she didn't have the words for. "Well," she said eventually, "just so you know, it matters." That night, I went home and finally removed the photo of Peter's graduation from the hallway wall. I didn't throw it away. I just placed it in the drawer with the notebook. Out of sight, where it belonged. The Colby house repairs were scheduled to start the following week. Ron said the plumbing needed a full update, and the roof might need patching. I told him to go ahead. I didn't care how long it took. I wasn't in a rush. I was doing this the right way, quietly, completely, without anyone's permission. And without needing to tell Peter or Meredith a single thing. The first time Peter noticed something was different was 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. He showed up at my door on a Sunday afternoon. No call, no warning, just the sound of tires on, the gravel, and a quick knock like he had done 100 times before. Except this time, I didn't rush to open the door. I took my time getting there. When I finally opened it, He stood on the porch holding a brown grocery bag and a half-hearted smile. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Thought I'd drop off some stuff." I looked at the bag. Apples, bread, a container of soup, things I hadn't asked for. I stepped aside so he could come in, but something about the way I moved made him hesitate. I didn't reach out for a hug, didn't ask how the kids were. I just let him in and waited. He set the bag on the counter and looked around. "Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. He cleared his throat. "You've been quiet?" I sat down at the table and folded my hands. "I've been busy." "With what?" he asked, too quickly. I looked up at him. "Helping at the community center, sorting donations, delivering food." He raised his eyebrows. "That's nice. I didn't know you were doing that." "You didn't ask." He shifted his weight. "Well, I'm asking now." I didn't respond right away. I watched him as he stood in my kitchen, trying to make sense of this new version of me. A version that didn't try to fill the space with easy conversation or warm his ego with praise. Finally, I said, "I've realized something. I spent a lot of time trying to stay useful to people who don't see me anymore." He blinked. "Is that about Thanksgiving?" "It's about a lot of things, Peter. Not just one night." He started to say something, then stopped, then tried again. Meredith didn't mean anything by it. She just thought it'd be easier this year. Less noise. "I wasn't noise, Peter. I was your mother. I still am." He looked down at the floor like he didn't know what to say. I let the silence stay between us. I wasn't going to rush to fill it for him. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. "Meredith thought you'd understand, that you'd rather stay home than deal with all the chaos." I stared at him. "Then why didn't either of you ask me?" He looked back at me, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't have a smooth answer. He left a few minutes later, after a quiet goodbye. No hug, no promise to call soon, just a muttered, "Take care," and the sound of the door closing behind him. That night, I sat at the table with my tea and my notebook. Ron had sent an update on the Colby house. Plumbing repairs finished, roof patching underway, the front porch needed sanding and repainting. Missy didn't know anything yet. I hadn't told her. I wanted everything in place before I made the offer. She was still coming by the center every week, volunteering when she could, helping with sorting or organizing meals for the weekend crowd. The kids were doing better. She mentioned the stomach bug had passed. She even joked that the youngest, Ava, had tried to cook toast in the microwave and nearly burned a hole through a napkin. We laughed. It felt good. But I noticed something else that day. Missy didn't smile as easily as she used to. Not when she talked about money. Not when she mentioned school papers or overdue rent. And definitely not when she said she might have to move again after the holidays if things don't settle. That was the moment I knew. I went home, took out the revised deed Thomas had sent me, and signed the final page. The house was still under my ownership, but everything was prepared. When I was ready, I could assign full rights. Not in the distant future. Whenever I chose, I had a plan. 2 days later, Meredith called. That was unusual. Her voice was tight, and she tried to act like it wasn't about anything specific. "Hi, Margaret, just checking in. Peter said he stopped by." "He did," I said. A pause. "He mentioned you were volunteering." "I am." Another pause. "That's nice. I mean, good. You've always been generous." I didn't reply. She cleared her throat. "Listen, I've been meaning to talk to you about Christmas. We're hosting again, and I wanted to extend the invite. I was going to call sooner, but things got busy." I could feel the strain in her voice. It was forced. Not guilt, exactly. More like obligation. Like she'd just remembered I existed because Peter had come home looking rattled. I took a breath. "No, thank you," I said. She paused. "I'm sorry? I won't be attending." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Is this because of Thanksgiving?" she asked, voice lower now. It's because I've finally started listening to what your silence has been telling me for years. Another pause. I'm not sure I follow. I'm sure you do, I said. But that's okay. I'm not looking for explanations. I ended the call before she could fumble through whatever apology she might have prepared. Or not. That Friday, I showed up to the community center with an envelope in my coat pocket. I waited until Missy was done stacking canned goods, then asked if she could talk outside for a minute. It was cold. We stood under the awning, our breath showing in the air. I have something for you, I said, handing her the envelope. She opened it slowly. Inside was a letter, not a legal document, just a letter, written in plain handwriting. From me. She read the first few lines, then looked up. What is this? It's a house, or it will be, once I finish the transfer. I want you to have it. She froze. I don't understand. You will. It's in Colby, near the lake. It needs a little work, but it's solid. 2 bedrooms, a porch, plenty of space. You won't owe a dime. She looked down at the paper, then back at me. Why would you do this? I didn't know how to explain it without making it sound like I was trying to play the hero. I wasn't. I was just tired of giving my energy to people who would never notice if I disappeared. So I said, because you're the kind of person who shows up, and I want that house to matter. She stared at me like she didn't believe it. Was real. Take your time, I said. Think about it. But it's yours if you want it. She nodded slowly, folding the letter back into the envelope like it was made of glass. That night, I went home and turned off my phone. No messages, no voicemails, no apologies. And for once, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like peace. A week before Christmas, I received a card in the mail. No return address, just the Hutchins family, written in thick, looping letters on the front of the envelope. I knew Meredith had written it. She always used that same overdone cursive for holiday cards. She liked things that looked polished, even when there was nothing real behind them. I opened it slowly and read the printed message first. Wishing you peace, love, and warmth this holiday season. Then came the handwritten note beneath. At Margaret, we'd love for you to join us on Christmas Eve. The kids have been asking about you. Please come. Love, Peter and Meredith. It was the first time I had seen the word love from them in writing in a long time, and even then it felt like a formality, like the word was included because it was expected, not because it was true. Left the card on the kitchen table for 2 days without touching it. Every time I passed by, I glanced at it and thought about how carefully timed it was. The same Meredith who had told me I wasn't invited to Thanksgiving had now sent me a card in a shiny gold envelope, like nothing had happened. I knew what this was. It wasn't an apology. It was strategy. Peter had said something to her. Maybe mentioned that I had changed, that I was doing other things, that I wasn't calling, and that worried her, because people like Meredith needed to be in control, and control was slipping. I didn't respond. The next day, I got a call from Peter. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Hey, Mom, I hope you got our card. Meredith put a lot of thought into it. We'd really like to see you on Christmas Eve. We'll be having dinner around 6. You don't even have to bring anything. Just come. It would mean a lot. I sat with that message for a while, played it again, noticed the wording. You don't even have to bring anything. As if I'd ever needed prompting to contribute. As if I hadn't been the one bringing full meals, cleaning the kitchen, wrapping gifts, and watching the kids every year without fail. It wasn't about the food. It was about what they had made me feel like I was, a fixture, not a person, useful, but replaceable. I deleted the message and moved on with my day. The next morning, Missy showed up at the community center again. She looked tired. Her coat zipped up to her chin and her hands shoved deep in her pockets. I read the letter again, she said. I nodded. I showed it to my oldest. She didn't believe it either. I almost laughed. It's a lot to take in. I want to see it. The house. You can. We made plans to drive up to Colby 2 days later. I called Ron and told him we'd be visiting. He said he'd have the keys ready and the heat turned on. We left early in the morning. The drive took almost 3 hours with light traffic. Missy sat in the passenger seat, mostly quiet, looking out the window. I could tell she was trying to imagine it, not just the house, but the idea that someone was offering her something without asking for anything in return. We pulled up around 10. The cottage sat just beyond a row of pines, its wooden frame lightly dusted with snow. The roof had been patched, just like Ron said, and the porch looked freshly painted. The lake behind it was partially frozen, the dock lined with a thin layer of frost. Missy stepped out and stood still for a long time. Then she turned toward me. "This is a real house." "It is." "No one's going to show up and change their mind?" "No one." She took slow steps up to the front door. Ron had left it unlocked for us. We walked in together. The floors creaked a little, but the space was solid, clean. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen with a gas stove, and a living room that looked out over the lake. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe, quiet, and hers, if she wanted it. "Can't take this," she said finally, standing near the window. "You can," I said. "And you should." She shook her head. "Why me?" "Because I spent years giving things to people who didn't appreciate them." "You do." She didn't say anything for a long time, just walked from room to room, running her hand along the window frames, checking the inside of the cabinets, trying not to show too much emotion. But when we stepped outside again, she looked at me and said, "I'll take care of it, I swear." "I know you will." The drive home was quiet again, but this time it wasn't tension. It was something closer to understanding. She didn't thank me again. She didn't have to. That evening, I got another text from Peter. "Just checking in. We're finalizing the Christmas Eve dinner. Still hope you'll come. Let us know, okay?" I didn't respond. Instead, I went to my closet and pulled out the box with the Christmas ornaments. It had been a long time since I decorated. I used to do it for Peter when he was little. And then, when he had kids, I would always bring a few ornaments over for their tree. Special ones I found at local shops, or ones I made myself. I opened the box and sorted through the pieces. One by one, I wrapped them in newspaper and set them aside. Then I taped a note to the top of the pile. "For your new beginning. May this house hold more love than mine ever did." The next morning, I packed everything into the trunk of my car and drove it to Missy's apartment. She wasn't expecting me. When she opened the door, I handed her the box. "I thought these belonged in Colby." She nodded slowly. "You want to come in?" "No," I said, "but I'll be back after the holidays. We'll get you moved in." She smiled, not wide, but real. "Okay." I got in the car and drove home, passing Peter's neighborhood again on the way. That evening, Meredith called. I didn't pick up. Then came a text. "Margaret, we really don't understand why you're doing this. The kids miss you. Peter misses you. Please don't punish us for one bad decision. It's Christmas." I stared at the message for a while. Then, I typed one sentence. "You only noticed I was gone when I stopped making things easier for you." I didn't send it. I just deleted it, turned off my phone, and went to bed. That night, I slept through until morning. No interruptions. No guilt and no regrets. Christmas Eve came, cold and gray, with patches of frost on the windows and the scent of firewood in the air. I didn't put up a tree. I didn't bake. I didn't even bother watching the usual holiday movies. I spent the morning going through some papers, organizing a few drawers, and making a pot of chili that would last me through the next 2 days. I kept my phone off. Not on silent. Off. By the time evening rolled in, I could imagine the Hutchins house in full swing. Meredith would be buzzing around the kitchen, checking on casseroles, adjusting the napkins, directing the kids. Peter would be making small talk with his coworkers, refilling glasses of wine, telling someone how hard it's been with Mom lately. They'd eat, they'd smile for photos, and somewhere in the middle of it, one of the kids would ask where I was, and Meredith would lie. "She's not feeling well." Or, She wanted to spend it quietly this year. Something tidy. Something that sounded reasonable. But Peter would know the truth. And that was enough. Next morning, Christmas Day, I went for a walk. It was brisk, the streets mostly empty. A few houses had kids running around on their lawns with new bikes or scooters, their parents standing on porches with coffee mugs. I waved at one or two neighbors. They waved back. No one asked what my plans were. When I got home, there was a voicemail waiting for me, left while the phone had been off. It was Peter. His voice was flat, not angry, just confused. "Mom, I don't know what's going on anymore. The kids were really upset you weren't there. Meredith tried. I tried. I don't know what else we were supposed to do. It's like you've changed all of a sudden, and now everything's different. Anyway, Merry Christmas, I guess." That was it. Not a word about how I might be feeling, not a question, not even a sign of reflection, just frustration that things weren't working the way they used to. I didn't call him back. The next day, I met Missy at the Colby house with a moving truck we rented together. Ron had left the heat on and even cleaned out the attic space. Missy brought Ava and Jordan with her. Ava was 6 and didn't stop asking questions. Jordan was 9, quiet but helpful. He helped carry boxes from the truck without being told. We unloaded everything by noon and spent the rest of the afternoon arranging things inside. Nothing fancy, just the essentials. Her couch, her mattresses, some bags of clothes, a few kitchen boxes, and the ornament box I'd given her earlier. I helped her hang a few on the little artificial trees she'd brought with them. Ava placed one of the old ceramic stars at the top and said, "This one's my favorite. It looks like it's been through a lot." I smiled. It has. By evening, we had unpacked enough for the first night. Missy had brought a small lasagna from the freezer, and I stayed long enough to share a slice before heading back. Before I left, she stood at the door and asked, "Are you sure?" "About what?" "That you don't want the place back someday." "No," I said. "I'm not going to need it. You will, and that's what matters." She nodded, still hesitant, but the look in her eyes told me she understood. The next week passed quietly. I didn't hear from Peter. Meredith didn't call. No Happy New Year texts. Nothing. It was the longest I'd gone without a word from them. And strangely, it didn't hurt. On the 2nd of January, I stopped by the bank and finalized the transfer of the remaining funds I'd set aside for the cottage maintenance account, now in Missy's name. I closed out the old paperwork with Thomas Brandt, shredded a few copies at home, and tucked the last remaining document into a safe folder in my filing cabinet. With that, the last legal connection to that property was done. A few days later, Peter called. This time I answered. "Hi, Mom," he said. "I guess you're still upset." "I'm not upset," I said. There was a pause. "Then what is it?" I just stopped pretending. Another pause. "I don't know what that means," he said, voice a little tighter now. "It means I've accepted that the relationship we have now is the one you're comfortable with, and I've adjusted to it." He sighed into the phone. "That's not fair. Neither is being erased." He didn't say anything. I continued. "I'm not angry. I'm just done trying to force something that only works when I'm giving everything and getting nothing." He started to say something, but I didn't let him. "Peter, I gave you every chance. I waited. I stayed quiet. I did what I thought a good mother should do, but it turns out being a good mother, to you, meant being convenient." "That's not true," he said quickly. "Then tell me, what do you actually know about my life?" Silence. What am I doing now? Where do I go? Who do I spend time with? He had no answer. After a while, he said, "I don't know what you want me to say." "You don't have to say anything," I said. "I just needed you to listen." There was a long pause before he finally said, Okay. I let that sit for a moment. Then I said goodbye and hung up. No drama, no yelling, just a line drawn, quietly and firmly. That weekend, I drove back to Colby to visit Missy and the kids. She had already planted a few winter greens along the, porch. Ava had taped a drawing of the house to the refrigerator with the words, "Our Home," scrawled across the top in bright crayon. They offered me a seat at their table for dinner. Just lasagna again, but this time with a salad and a basket of rolls. We talked about school and snow and how Jordan wanted to try fishing when the lake thawed. When I left, Missy hugged me at the door, not out of obligation, just because she wanted to. I drove home slowly that night, taking the back roads. No part of me missed the old routine. No part of me longed for Meredith's perfectionism or Peter's shallow apologies. They had pushed me out of their lives, assuming I'd always circle back. But I didn't. I took something they didn't realize. They'd miss until it was gone, my presence, my care, my willingness to give without question. And this time, I gave it to someone who actually needed it. I didn't need to tell them what I'd done. I didn't need to make a scene. They'd feel it soon enough, not when they looked around the house. But when they reached for what used to be automatic, my help, my time, my quiet support, and realized it wasn't there anymore, I hadn't vanished out of bitterness. I had simply gone where I mattered,